Three, three, three. Hello, I am WM Siegel, and I'm here today to talk about the Indus Valley script, the language of the ancient Indus Valley civilization, which when I was in college they called the Harappan civilization. I studied uh, a lot of archaeology, and when we learned about this, so the Indus Valley, it's in northwest India. The Indus Valley civilization would have been in its earliest time, um, which is about 3200 BC, so we're talking like 5,000 years ago. You know, basically. And it would have been the early stages of what became a mature civilization around 2500 BC, which puts you at the reunification or the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, to place it. It's contemporary with ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, but in those early stages, what we look back, we see civilization, but it's people that are separated, a little bit of commonality coming together. This Indus Valley civilization wasn't just Pakistan and India. And for, I think, political reasons, it just gets discussed in that way, and people tug and they pull. There are organizations in southern India that are dedicated to proving that the Indus Valley civilization started in India. It didn't start anywhere, it doesn't matter. But this thing went all the way up to Afghanistan, and all the way down to Sri Lanka, sure. But as things centralize, power, culture, you end up with a unit, and that was northwestern India, also Pakistan. At the time wasn't Pakistan, right? That was India too. So when people were naming these things in the early 1900s. So, I'm in college and I hear about this language that hasn't been deciphered yet, right? 25 years later, still hasn't been deciphered. It's fascinating because we know the cuneiform, we know of the Akkadians, the Sumerians, any number of people using that alphabet, we had the Rosetta Stone, thankfully, for the ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and the hieratic. But languages in this region are very difficult to work through, even when they're using our script, right? For instance, a civilization, the Bactrians, which I'm very fascinated by, had no written language. They were in Afghanistan. No written language. And I'll do a video about these on their own, but they had no written language. They adopted the Greek script to be used as their alphabet to then write their language using this Greek script. That's indecipherable unless you know the Bactrian language, So there's all these mysteries out there. Ancient Greek slapped on the side of things, and what's that doing there? Well, Alexander. But so language in this region is very difficult to pin down because a lot of people have gone over it. You're south of, but it's the same trouble that people, you study archaeology in Tajikistan and these places that were on the Silk Road. Just 1,000 years of people trampling over that material culture takes its toll, But I digress. In India, you have this language that's as old as ancient Egyptian, probably much older, and it hasn't been deciphered. You've got people using computer programs to try to compare it with other things, cross-comparison and all that. That's really mostly what you got to do. But if nothing extant is built from that language, there's nothing to compare it to. It's very difficult. It's not impossible because it came from humans. It sprang from us. Well, we can find it. There's argument of whether or not this collection of symbols are even a language, right? Or are they just a location, a time, and the product? You know, a lot of these things show up on terracotta seals that would have been put over packaging, essentially. So is this just a civilization that was trading with everyone and everything in the world to a point where they needed this complicated system of symbols to let you know that this came from here, it's this, and it was packed on this date? I mean, that's brilliant. It's also language. I think we have to redefine what we're calling language when we go so far back in time. It could get to a point where you could look at the first written language and say, well, that's not a language. Well, there was no written language before this, my friend. You know, your concept of written language is from right now. So I think it's silly to go at it saying, maybe it's not a language. It is. It's communicating something, all right? Stop. You know, it's communication, human communication through symbols. It's abstract. That's all you need to know. There's no argument to be had about what the nature of what's being communicated. Ugh, who cares? I think there's like sometimes racist motivations when people do things like that. Well, they didn't have language. Man, like what? So anyway, I've always been very interested in this. And I said to myself as like a 20-year-old in college, man, I'm going to crack that code. I think everybody did. And still nobody has. You know? It's very exciting. But throughout my life, I've never lost my interest in archaeology, or that particular region, really. And I've collected things through my life, and I've never stopped researching, you know. And it is at this age that I think I did figure out not what one means, but I think I've determined the origin of one of the more common symbols. And I think that's what we need to do to crack this code. We're coming at it from the current, going back, saying, is it related to this language, this language, this language, this language? We need to go at it from the very beginning. The very beginning. 4,000 BC. And we need to say to ourselves, how am I going to communicate this thing to this guy? We need to say, why this symbol? People look at some symbols and they say, well, it's a fish. Yeah, because it's a fish. That doesn't necessarily mean that. It could just be that that symbol was come across near a place known for fish. But it, in its meaning, might have nothing to do with that. Now you might say, well, that'd be dumb. Why would they? Who are you to judge? Get out of here. We need to start from the very beginning. Humble ourselves and try to reconstruct this thing with the world around us. And we will find the answer. I promise you. I've collected a lot of things in my life. Things that I don't know. You know, antique stores, estate sales, things like that, archaeological stuff, old professors I know. You know, there's a lot of things that just get trampled on and just, once they get, 60 years ago, they got dug up somewhere and then they get thrown around the world as baubles, keychains, and, you could have an intaglio on a tie tack that is a Persian king, and not know it. There's a lot of these things out there to where It's very weird. But I collect things like that, and I try to learn from it. If I see something somewhere, and I recognize in it, um, ancient Greek around a Zoroastrian astrological figure, it's probably Bactrian. So I'm buying it, and I'm going to keep it safe, and I'm going to learn everything I can from it. And then I'm going to tell people about it. Then ultimately, send it somewhere that it can be looked at by everyone, Unfortunately, Afghanistan is where the Bactrians were, and I wouldn't trust that place with a single piece of its own material culture at the moment. So, the Indus Valley, I came across a bead or a cylinder a long time ago, and had made an air dry, non-toxic, everything, air dry clay mold of it. Sure, not the most responsible thing, but it was very responsible for whoever had it to be having it dinging around. And that mold, I was able to make impressions. I'm an artist as well. A lot of these things I make a single mold and then make multiple impressions and make artwork with ancient imagery, in the hopes that we'll figure out what the heck it's about. And I'll show you what I think is the origin of one of the more common symbols we see. There's hundreds, there's a lot of, not hundreds, I forget, maybe 66 different unique, what we consider Indus Valley symbols. If you go back further in time, you're going to find variations on all of them, right? And then maybe they solidified into the one. Maybe. Again, we don't know. I'm going to show you an impression made by a cylinder. I painted where you see color. Now it's this. These two beasts and this third, I want you to look at. Positions of their heads. Then you get this one. You go down. You see the plant here. I can't be sure, but this could be telling of passage of time, because the horns grow and the plant grows and the beasts take a different shape. Maybe awkward birth, adolescence, adulthood. Perhaps, I don't know. My interest is this, because this, I believe, became this. This symbol here looks like a tree. Is very common. Now this, that's from Afghanistan. Many, many, many centuries later. Not connected to anything in the at the time that was made in Afghanistan. It has nothing to do with that Indus history. It's just from a medallion that is from either Parsis or Zoroastrian akin tribal religion. So I think that branch or that tree is from that bead. I think a lot of these beads, seals, There's ones that are full of language, full of maps, things like that. These early ones, that early one, it's communicating something. Now, I've seen theory that when an image like that, the elongation, the awkwardness of it, perhaps it's a zeotrope, right? A primitive animation where the thing spins real fast. I have something that is like that, but for a different video. Or perhaps that image would have been put on wet clay and you would just have flickering light in front of it, right? And that flickering light would be an even more primitive zeotrope, the interruption of light, and what looks like a strange elongation in the animal is actually makes it so that the shadow that you see is the animal moving. Maybe that's how lessons were taught before language. Maybe there was a cave, right? With shadows. Think back to Plato, right? Did he hear a story about how philosophies were originally taught? He was aware of Zoroaster or Zarathustra. He was aware of the Bactrians. They all were. So much of ancient Greek knowledge is built on top of, or even just in reverence of, really what was going on in Persia, I guess. But you say Persia, it's not just countries, So I hope that, I emailed, I don't know what it's called there, but there's a minister of parliament in India who offered $1 million reward for somebody who cracks the Indus script. He's politically motivated. He wants it to be from southern India. He's very adamant about that. I emailed him this. Yeah, I remember back. But I do think that this is the origin of this symbol, and I think that looking for the origins of the symbols is going to help us figure this out, while others also look at it from the other angle. Don't stop using your computer programs, man. Figure this stuff out. I don't know how to do it. But I know how to look at material culture. I have a photographic memory, and when I see symbols and things, they connect. And I've seen a lot. I collect, I make impressions of everything I've ever collected. I have drawers of them. And I look at them, and I try to determine what the connective tissue is, I want to know the history, because it unifies us. It does. It unifies us when we have common history. And the further back we go, the more common that history is going to be, because ultimately there's going to be 10,000 human beings saying, "Yeah, it was us. We started it all. How did it turn out?" So that's the Indus Valley symbol that I think I determined the origin of. Take a look at the symbols. They're fun. There's no reason to think that you're not going to be able to determine where one came from. Pick one. Just pick one. And then look at every instance of it ever happening. Does it remind you of something? If it doesn't work out, pick another one. People are looking at this as words. You're not going to figure it out that way. We got to figure out why the letter looks like the letter. What further back you go in history with language, that's what you got to do. So linguists and artists and archaeologists and tinkerers unite. I think I figured out where one of the symbols is from. Don't know what it means, but I know where it's from. And that's a start. As far as I'm concerned, it's literally the first step. All right, take care, gang.